All right, Ling 441. Today we have our last lecture on the TOBI intonation transcription system, and we're just going to add one more element to the system in the form of three different bitonal pitch accents. Excuse me. Um, yeah, so normally at this point, when I lecture in class, I just start off this lecture by saying, well, what do we know about TOBI so far? Just to kind of reset and make sure we have our foundation set. So we don't really have the opportunity to do that right now, so I'm just going to walk you through the basic elements that we have so far. On the one hand, we have pitch accents, and we've learned two of those, H star and L star, and like I said, we're going to add three more to that, the cadre of pitch accents we have today. And we also have phrase accents, which we learned about last time. Those are H dash and L dash, and they align with the ends of intermediate phrases. We also have boundary tones, which are H percent sign and L percent sign, and they align with the ends of intonational phrases. We have 5 different break indices, although we tend to use only 4. So ranging from 0 to 4, where 4 aligns with the end of an intonational phrase, 3 aligns with the end of an intermediate phrase, so 3 goes with these guys, 4 goes with these guys, 1 is with the end, goes with the end of a word, and 0 is where you have co-articulation across a word boundary. And then we also learned about these phenomena known as downstepping and upstepping. So upstepping is something that happens after a H dash phrase accent and just boosts up the pitch range for these two guys if they're following that one. Downstepping is something which happens, at least theoretically, within an intermediate phrase, and you get progressively lower. F0 peaks for high star pitch accents as you go through the intermediate phrase. But they're optional in this particular case, so try not to forget about that. The last thing I'll mention here, just as a reminder, is that these pitch accents will align with the stressed syllable on some word within an intermediate or intonational phrase. So that's basically how it works. And what do we need to add to this to kind of get the complete picture? There are 3 bitonal pitch accents in addition to H star and L star, and they make our life a little bit complicated. So the first 2 are a little bit easier to understand because they both have a pattern of going from low to high, and the only difference between them is whether it's the high part of that pairing that is starred or the low part of that pairing. And that's the important thing to notice with these, is that only one part of these bitonal pitch accents gets the starred element associated with it. That means that the starred element is the part of the bitonal pitch accent which is associated with the stressed syllable in whatever word it's aligning on. So I'll give you a couple examples of what these sound like. Both of these are going to have kind of a low F0 rising up pretty quickly to a high element, and it's just the timing that differs between the two. So with a low plus high star, the high peak, the starred part of this, is going to be on the stressed syllable, and that's going to be preceded by a sharp rise in pitch.
Only a millionaire.
I gotta turn that up a bit.
Only a millionaire.
So,
Only a millionaire.
Yeah, I'll play it again because you haven't heard it enough yet. But the accented syllables are the stressed syllables and only and millionaire. So just try to focus on what you... So the theory behind TOBI says that when you have a pitch accent, it has to align to a stressed syllable in a word. So when you are listening for pitch accents, you want to listen for what you know is the stressed syllable in a word, right? So only, the first syllable is stressed. Likewise, millionaire, the first syllable is stressed there as well. What do you hear on that stressed syllable? If you're hearing a high peak in F0 on that stressed syllable, you know you're dealing with a high star of some sort.
Only a millionaire.
And that's what you get in that particular utterance. The contrast here is we have a low star plus high, so the low pitch target is on the stressed syllable followed by a sharp rise in pitch. So this is going to be really subtle because you're going to hear both the stressed syllable and only and millionaire as sounding more prominent, but they sound more prominent with a low kind of dip in their F0 because that low star is what's associating with that stressed syllable, and then you get the rise after it.
Only Only a millionaire. Only a millionaire.
Yeah, sorry, it's not on only. It's only on millionaire. So I'll show you the pitch contours here in a second. But the tricky part of this is learning how to listen for this because these otherwise sound very similar. So in this one, the rise comes before you get to that stressed syllable. In this one, the rise in F0 comes after the stressed syllable. So let's try to focus just on listening to millionaire in these two examples.
Only a millionaire. Only a millionaire.
And hopefully you can hear that the second one, it's dipping down on the mill part of millionaire.
Only a millionaire.
Yeah, and then it rises after that. So I've got a couple of other examples here. This is also one that's easy to confuse. So H star versus low plus H star. The difference here is not in timing, but more in terms of the rise in F0. So with a low plus H star, you should get a more dramatic rise in F0 to get to the peak for the H star part of it. For regular H star, you do get a peak, but it's not as dramatically, exponential, you might say, rising into the top of the F0 contour.
Mariana won it.
Remember, the stressed syllable here is this third syllable in the name Mariana, or the penultimate syllable.
Mariana won it.
And we get a more dramatic rise here.
Mariana won it.
And I think you can hear that one pretty easily.
Mariana won it.
As you might kind of expect or think, though, this is kind of a gradient distinction. This is just kind of like more of a rise than this one is. They both have rises, so where the boundary is between these two is a little bit fuzzy. It's kind of a judgment call. But if you hear that sort of sharp rise and sort of really distinct accents, this one might sound a little bit more prominent than this one.
Mariana won. Mariana won it. Mariana won it.
Yeah. So one way to think about this is that these serve two different functions in discourse, in that just a regular H star is providing an informative function, like, well, who won the Scrabble game? Mariana won it. I thought that Joan won it. Mariana won it. Yeah, maybe I should let Mary answer those instead. Who won the Scrabble game?
Mariana won it.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought that Joan would win it.
Mariana won it.
Okay, if you say so. All right, something like that. So this one is contrastive. It's not somebody else, it's Mariana. Here is an example of low star versus low star plus high contrast. This one's way easier to hear because with this one, you just kind of go down low and you stay down low. With these, you get a rise after the low star. The crucial low star plus high that we're going to listen for is on millionaire. We've heard this one before.
Only a millionaire.
So this also gives you kind of a contrast between low plus high star and low star plus high.
Only a millionaire.
We get these nice sharp peaks for both of them. It's just a timing difference. So for only, you should hear that F0 peak on the first syllable of only.
Only a millionaire.
And for the millionaire, it's dipping down here for the mill part and then rising after it when you get into the second syllable, but not really specified whether it's second or third or whatever.
Only a millionaire.
And then this one is a lot easier to parse. It just might be a little bit harder to hear these low stars because they're usually not super prominent as it is.
Mariana made the marmalade.
So you should ideally be hearing an L star on the A part of Mariana and also the marm part of marmalade.
Mariana made the marmalade. Mariana made the marmalade.
Boom, boom, down low, and then it rises at the tail end because this is a yes-no question. We can hardly believe it that Mariana would make marmalade after she won that Scrabble contest, but yeah, maybe she did.
Mariana made the marmalade.
She's amazing. Anyways, there's another thing I want to point out here in the only a millionaire utterance.
Only a millionaire.
Which is that at the tail end here, we have a low dash high boundary tone combo. This is that kind of continuation rise. So it shouldn't sound quite as dramatic as this HH rise that we get at the end of a yes-no question, but it's still there. You can see pretty nicely in the spectrogram, this is kind of convenient that Mary Beckman goes into creaky voice here because she's hitting the bottom of her F0 range. And then it pops up right after that.
Only a millionaire.
So this is like three different sort of low-high sequences that you can get in the TOBI system. They're all formally different, though. This is low plus high star. low star plus high, and then low dash H percent sign. And they differ primarily in terms of, well, on the one hand in terms of their timing, but also primarily in terms of what they're aligning with, right? So this is the H star is aligning with the stressed syllable and only. In this case, the L star is what's aligning with the stressed syllable and millionaire. And here, nothing's really aligning with any stressed syllables at all. This is just the combination of tones we get at the tail end of the intonational phrase. So it's just aligning with the end of the phrase. Yeah, so here's this tricky contrast again. This is this phrase, and I'll let Mary produce it, but this one has low star plus highs, and this one has low plus high stars. So again, you have to focus on what's happening with the stressed syllables in the words lovely and Bloomingdale's. And I'll let you listen to it a couple times first.
There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's. There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's.
We'll do it one more time.
There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's. There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's.
Right, so if you just focus on these stressed syllables where you know these starred elements have to go, you can listen and decide for yourself, am I hearing a dip or am I hearing a peak in F0?
There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's.
And if you're really tuning in closely, you should be able to hear a dip, the L starred element on those stressed syllables for this utterance, for both of the words.
There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's.
And then there's a sharp rise right after it. Here you hear a peak on both of the stressed syllables.
There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's. There's a lovely one in Bloomingdale's.
Still a sharp rise, so we're getting this kind of L plus H star combo, but the H star is what aligns with the stressed syllables. Okay, so this is tricky, but we'll try to practice it and just give it your best shot. Kind of the most important part of this is that you understand why you'd use the different transcriptions in different scenarios. Again, the important part of the starred elements is they are the ones that are aligning with the stressed syllables. I want to go back a bit to this continuation rise. Here's an example of this utterance. Just play it for you first.
Stein's not a bad man.
So this starts out with a L star plus high. So there's an accent on the name Stein here. And you can see this nice little dip right in the middle of the only syllable in the word. And then it rises dramatically right after it.
Stein's not a bad man.
That makes it an L star plus high. What's kind of interesting is what happens afterwards, which is basically nothing dramatic other than the fact that the F0 goes way back down to the bottom of the speaker's range and then only kind of trends up at the very end.
Stein's not a bad man.
So the idea here is that this is a feature of phrase accents and that they fill in the gap between the nuclear accent or the last pitch accent in the intermediate phrase and then the boundary of the whole intermediate phrase or leading into the intonational phrase. So we go from low star plus high, and then we have to go all the way back down for this low dash, which just fills in this gap here between the end of the intonational phrase and the last pitch accent in the intonational phrase.
Stein's not a bad man.
Yeah. I'll just be honest, you might hear a low star here on man, which would kind of invalidate some of this analysis, but we'll just pretend that it's not there and just say this is a low dash filling in this entire gap here at the end. That's what phrase accents do. Okay, another thing I should point out is that bitonal pitch accents can also undergo downstepping.
There's a lovely yellowish old one.
So this is slightly more dramatic. Rises in F0 for these pitch accents on this phrase for lovely, yellowish, and old. And
there's a lovely yellowish old one.
You can hear those peaks, or you can see it as well. Those peaks go down in F0 as you proceed through the phrase. And in order to denote that in your transcriptions, you put an exclamation mark in front of the H star part of that bitonal pitch accent. So this is the first one. You can't downstep the first pitch accent in an intonational phrase, so it just looks normal. Then after that, because it's going down a bit in F0, we're still getting kind of a dramatic rise, but it's a bit lower than it was before, so we put the exclamation mark in front of the H star.
There's a lovely yellowish old one.
Before I leave this lecture as well, kind of the prototypical pattern you want to see with a low plus high star is nicely visible on this particular example of the pitch accent, which is that you kind of get this scooping effect. I called it exponential before. I've been thinking way too much about coronavirus graphs, but what are you going to do? But it's not linear, right? So this is more linear. It just looks like a straight line. This looks like an exponential, if you remember math from advanced math from high school or wherever, where it changes as it changes, such that it's rising more dramatically than just a straight line. So that's ideally what you're supposed to see with a bitonal pitch accent. You get it here. It's kind of curvy, right? Rather than just being straight. So if you look for that, if you see that, you know that you've got a bitonal pitch accent. So please transcribe it accordingly. These others are a little more ambiguous. Like I said, it's kind of a fuzzy line in between the two. This one maybe you get a bit here. But the idea is if you hear that more dramatic rise, it should be a bitonal pitch accent where you get the kind of low to high effect for it. Lastly, if you're not confused enough, this is the last bitonal pitch accent in the system. And I kind of wanted to walk through downstepping of the start elements in bitonal pitch accents before I got to it, because this one always has a downstepped start element in it. It's a bit weird. It's H plus downstepped high star. And this is the last thing we're going to have to learn for Toby. And it's not that common. It often appears at the beginning of phrases. You would think, just for symmetry's sake, that you might get a nice little pattern where you have, in addition to L plus H star, L star plus H, you also have something like H plus L star, or H star plus L in the Toby system. And originally, I believe that was the way it was formulated back in the early 80s, but then they decided, no, they don't really exist. These other H plus L things. Instead, they replaced both of them with this guy, which is H plus downstepped H star. So you will see a slightly falling F0 pattern for this, but it's weird because this is, again, the start element of it, so it has to align with the stressed syllable and whatever it attaches to, but it has an H tone before you get to that start element, so this one is actually a little bit lower than it would be normally. So this is the one exception where you do get downstepping usually in the first pitch accent in an intermediate or intonational phrase. So yeah, so it's kind of funny, and it sounds a little bit funny too, but it's distinctive at the same time because it is unusual, so you can usually pick it out if you hear it. So I'll give you this canned example.
You want an example? Mother Teresa.
Yeah, so the H plus downstepped H star here is on Teresa, that part of Mother Teresa, and the second syllable is what's being stressed here in Teresa, and that's where the downstepped H star is. So this whole thing starts out at a relatively high part of the speaker's pitch range, and then it goes down a bit to get to that accented or stressed part of the pitch accent. And because it's doing that, but not actually bottoming out at the very end or bottom of the speaker's pitch range, it's not a low star, it's just a downstepped high star.
You want an example? Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa. So you can feel it going down there as she goes through the stressed syllable in Teresa, but it's still accented. It should pop out at you as being more prominent than the other syllables.
You want an example? Mother Teresa.
Right? The rest of them go by a little more quickly and are not quite as prominent. So that's what this one sounds like. And like I said, it's not that common in English, but you do get it sometimes, so just keep your mind open for the possibility that it might be there sometimes. Okay, so what we have are 5 pitch accents. We have H star, we have low star. Those are pretty easy to understand. Then we have L plus H star and L star plus H, and those two differ primarily in timing. It's always the start element that aligns with the stressed syllable. So when you do make a transcription, make sure that's how those pitch accents fit into whatever you have transcribed. That's the rule. So just make sure you follow it. And then lastly, we have this funny little H plus downstepped H star. And again, this will work by the same rule as these two did, where the downstepped H star is the one that aligns with the stressed syllable in wherever you find it. Yeah, so I've said that about 25 times in this lecture. Hopefully that message has gotten through. If it hasn't, feel free to watch it again. And I'll also mention, repeating myself from a couple times before, that the final pitch accent in an intonational phrase is the nuclear accent. And in theory, this one is usually perceived as most prominent. That might vary depending on who's using the system or whatever the particular utterance is that you're playing around with. But in theory, this is what you're supposed to get. that this one is supposed to jump out a bit more. Okay, that is the entire Toby system. Like I said, there's not a whole lot in it, but it takes some practice to get used to, and that's why we kind of added it in small steps, or added them all in small steps, and we're going to just have some more practice again today or whenever you're watching this with the fourth Toby Lab exercise. Again, you can get to it through the labs link on the 441 homepage. It's just right here. We're going to do another one after this without a lecture preceding it because practice always helps. And this stuff doesn't often come that intuitively. But otherwise, I'm going to stop talking for now and we're going to start doing. So have fun with that. And I'll see you after a couple of exercise sets to talk about something totally new in the form of respiration or how we breathe to produce speech. So that's it for now.